Well, let's go ahead and get started. So today is going to be, for those of you that have been here before, a little bit different. It's going to be much more hands-on. So hopefully everybody brought their smartphone with them. We'll be doing a little bit of a demonstration. So today's topic is making social media videos with your smartphone. So this is going to be kind of starting from square one, showing you just a couple of the basic settings in your phone. We are not going to show you every single setting you can use in your phone camera. There's all kinds of stuff you can do there. You can experiment with it later, but we're going to show you how to use your phone a little bit. We're going to talk about opportunities to get your phone out when you have a chance to record a video, kind of brainstorm there. And then you can see I obviously have a lot of equipment, so a fair amount of the presentation today is going to be talking about how to use the phone, but then also how to supplement with some really affordable equipment to make yourself look and sound a lot better than your competitors, right? So we'll be getting into that and probably pass around a lot of the equipment. You can kind of check it out and hold it yourself. So as always, please make sure you check with your broker before you apply any of the things that we're teaching in this training. Make sure that you are adhering to any of the rules within your own company. Now before we get into the actual video content, I did have a request to talk about what happened with Cambridge Analytica. So who's heard of Cambridge Analytica? Okay, so it's been in the news. Obviously, it's a data privacy issue, and so we wanted to just kind of take 2-3 minutes to talk about what happened, and is there anything that you should be doing to make sure you're protecting client data, right? So Cambridge Analytica was a company, or is a company, that basically used a quiz. They used some sort of game on Facebook as a third-party application to collect information on people. And so what that is that Facebook has all kinds of data, right? And actually a lot of companies have all kinds of data. Amazon has a lot of data on you. Twitter has a lot of data. Google has a ton of data. So Facebook is not the only company that has all this kind of information. So it's a little bit unfair to only get mad at Facebook, to be honest, because they all have it. They all do these types of things. But Facebook's probably the biggest and probably has the most data. So Facebook used to, and they still do to a certain degree, allow third-party applications. So that means a company that is not Facebook can create some sort of program that can then be run on the Facebook platform. So a few years ago they had one called like Farmville. It was really big, and everybody's like making their fake little farms and spending all their time building their farms on Facebook. That one was big back when I was in college, so I guess it's been a while now. But that would be a third-party app. So these are companies that have certain permissions. Facebook gives them access to certain amounts of data, and they have certain rules they're supposed to follow. So the controversy here is that Cambridge Analytica actually saved a bunch of that data. So a lot of times they're not actually supposed to download it. They can access it, they can use it, to, for instance, make their app better. So they can use that data to give themselves feedback on what they're doing. But Cambridge Analytica kind of took it, and they violated some of the agreements Facebook had. So some of it is their fault, and then some of it is Facebook's fault because Facebook was a little bit loose with the kind of data that they would let third parties access, okay? So unfortunately for us as individuals or as business owners, there's not a lot we can do about this other than making sure that you are not using third-party apps unless you know exactly what you agreed to, right? So a lot of what happens here is that I think a lot of people are very conditioned to just kind of click OK. I want to play that game. Just click OK, click opt-in, right? I get it. We're not all going to read the terms of service. It would take an hour to read that long thing we agree to every time we click on something. But they do tell you what they're accessing in that document, all right? So if you're concerned about your own data and you want to know ways to protect yourself, so this isn't your necessarily clients, but yourself, just make sure that whenever you're asked for that agreement, that you either do read the document, you might not understand all of it, but you can go that far, or just automatically be really wary of saying yes to that kind of stuff, right? Facebook, once you've signed up, they may update their terms of service every now and then, and they'll ask you to agree to that new update. But they're not usually asking you to do that very frequently. So if it's happening, it's probably because you're agreeing to a third-party application, all right? So just remember, anytime you're asked to agree, hey, is it okay if we share this information or agree to our terms of service, either read it or just kind of maybe default to no. That's one way you can protect yourself. Another way you can protect yourself, and this is just for the whole internet, is make sure you have varied passwords. So another area that data has been hacked in a lot of cases, and this is something that can protect your clients, is make sure your passwords to different things are very different, right? Do not reuse the same password. If you need to, you can use something that's called, there's a bunch of these, but the one we use is called LastPass, so LASTPASS. It is an encrypted password manager, so it saves all of your passwords, so you can make them all different. You do not have to remember them, and you have one master password. The problem is if you forget the master password, they cannot access any of it. So it's not like you can, reset password. That just doesn't happen because it's encrypted, right? So it's protected, nobody can hack it, but if you forget your password, you're in trouble. But I would definitely recommend doing that, and then obviously make your master password very long. The longer the password is, the harder it is to guess or to hack. So it's actually better to have like a 4 or 5 word password, so you can pick random words or a phrase. That is more secure than a bunch of random letters and numbers if there's less, if it's shorter, okay?
What's the name of that?
It's called LastPass, so LASTPASS. So that kind of like last password, right? Last thing I'll say about all of this is that you do just want to be aware of how these big companies work nowadays. We are in what you would call kind of the age of information. So data, the kind of data that these companies collect, is in a lot of ways the new currency. So a lot of these companies, they are actually trading data with each other as opposed to money. And that's very valuable, right? So data is it's kind of a vague term. It doesn't really mean the same thing in different situations. But the basic idea is that the information that's collected on each one of us or on each business that's out there is very valuable from an advertising perspective, as well as just designing products and designing services for companies, right? So you do have to remember that there's a reason Facebook is free, and it's because you are what they're selling, right? And that's just the truth, is that Facebook is selling your data, and that's how they pay for everything. So they're a $500 billion company that doesn't charge their users money. They obviously make money somewhere, and they're making money off that data. Yeah?
I'm just curious. I thought whenever they have terms of agreement, you have to click yes.
You do, if you want to use their service. Yeah.
So you really, even if you read it and you don't like something that's in there, then you don't get to.
No, you can't change it. Yep. So you're reading it just to know what you're agreeing to, right? And there's a lot of permissions that you can change. So there's the term of service. There's also there's settings in your profile. There's settings all over the place. We can't really get into all of them right now. But if you just poke around, go to the settings in your profile, you'll find that there are certain things you can decide to share or not share with these companies, right? So you do have some control, but yeah, you just got to remember, like anytime you're on any website anywhere, you're being tracked, data's being collected. I mean, the idea of kind of privacy on the internet, it's sort of the Wild West in a lot of ways. I mean, you got to remember the internet's still only about 25 years old, right? And it's only really matured in the past 10 years or so. So I think it's just important to just know what you're getting into, and just remember, like, when you're using these services, that's the trade-off you're making, is that they're taking your data, and that's what they're getting in exchange, and then you just don't have to pay anything, right? So that's kind of the trade-off we do. So just try to remember that. This isn't obviously our main topic today, so I do want to move on, but I just wanted to touch on that since it's been such big news lately. So, who do they sell the data to? Me. They sell it to me, for one. So anytime I pay to advertise on Facebook, we're using that data. So they either sell the actual data, so they might talk to, let's say a phone company wants to know, like, I want to know where all the millennials are moving so we can decide where we want to open a new store. Like Facebook could sell them, they could do some research, and a lot of the data, they don't even know what they have. So somebody will say, I want to know this, can you, and they'll go and they'll do some analysis and run some algorithms and find out if they can figure those things out or not. But the big thing is they sell to advertisers. So I can go into Facebook and say, I want people who are interested in a certain type of car brand, right? So everybody who likes that page, but also people who have maybe clicked on some videos of that kind of car in the past, right? There's all kinds of things that might suggest you like something. And then I can target those people with ads, and I already know then that a lot of those people like this car brand. So if I sell those cars in my dealership, well, that's an obvious target market for me. So a lot of where they're making the money off the data is in their ads manager, but it's not the only place. They're making money elsewhere too. Okay? So I do want to spend the rest of the time focused on video here. So the first thing I want to do is just make sure everybody understands kind of why video is so important. making videos and using them to advertise real estate agents is the core of our business. That's what Connect Marketing does. And the reason for that is that really we see video as not a trend. It's not, it's not just something you should try. It's a tool in a lot of ways just like the telephone when it was first introduced, right? So I want you to think back to, I don't think anybody here was alive before the telephone probably, but think back to that situation where the telephone was first introduced and for the first time you could actually call someone in their house, right? And you were used to doing things like sending telegrams or even a letter, which would take obviously at least a couple days to get there, right? Obviously that was probably a big shift for people. I would imagine a lot of people felt like, oh, what an invasion of privacy. Like any random friend of mine can just ring my phone and I got to go answer it and talk to them whenever they want. It was probably a huge deal. And it probably took a while for most people to get comfortable with it. Well, that's what video is for our kind of current generation. So if you look at anybody under the age of about 20, and especially 15 or younger, video is the only way they communicate. I mean, a lot of them spend less time in person than I did as a kid. And they spend all of the same amount of time talking to their friends. So how are they doing it? They're doing it with especially video chat functions. Yes, they're on Snapchat. Snapchat just introduced a feature where 16 people can have a live video conference call at the same time. So everybody's on the screen, everybody can talk, everybody can do the AR emoji faces and all that kind of stuff. There's another app called House Party, which is essentially exactly that, which has been blowing up. It's huge amongst teenagers. A lot of what they do is they get together and they do their homework while they're on this app. So they're not actually together in person, they're just in their room and they're joking around and they're doing their homework together. So the reason I talk about that is that, video is a tool, right? It's almost like learning another language, and it's one of those things where you have, we all have one of these in our pocket. Obviously that's what we're talking about today. It's very, very easy to do compared to even just a few years ago, and it's only going to get bigger. So if you're sitting there and you're kind of, I don't know if I want to start doing this stuff, just remember, like, if you're not getting used to making video now, you are going to be really behind the trend in another couple of years. Right now, you can get kind of ahead of the trend, right? So that's what we're kind of trying to do today, just give you some basic pointers, get you started, and then just start experimenting and getting used to using it, right? So that's the idea. All right, so just a couple quick stats, and then we'll get into some actual how-tos. So right now, 1/3 of all online activity is spent watching video, and that number is only going to continue to go up. So if you think about that already, a lot of that time that people are watching video on their computers is what they used to be, is the time they used to spend watching network television, right? So the same amount of time we used to sit there on the couch at home, now we're sitting there with a tablet, but we're still watching video. It's not like we've been watching video for many decades already. Video on social media gets 1,200% more shares than text and images. So a lot of people have been talking about, hey, I post stuff on my business page, and nobody likes it anymore, nobody shares it, nobody does anything with it. Well, if you post the same kind of content, if you just post a video of yourself talking about whatever it is you would have posted before, it's going to get a much higher rate of engagement. And we often see, we'll post organically a video we make for a client on their business page, and then they'll share it to their personal page, and many of them have actually gotten over 1,000 views just from doing that. So this is not spending money to promote it. They can then spend money and get additional thousands of views, but just for free. So if you think about Facebook business page reach, is very low. Most things we post, if you post an article or a picture, you might get a like or two, maybe your friend comments on it. The same content, so talking about the same thing or filming the same thing, is going to get 1,200% more. So that's the 12 times as much. One other thing to keep in mind, a couple points here. 90 seconds, right? So you want to make sure that videos under 90 seconds, they have an average retention rate of 53%. So that means you got to keep things short. Right? So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is videos that are really under 30 seconds in a lot of cases. You can get a little bit longer if someone already knows who you are and they have an interest in you or your business. But really, initially, especially on Facebook, you want to be doing short videos. And then you can see that the contrast there is video over 30 minutes only retain 10% of viewers, obviously. So there is use for long video, but you don't want to do too much of it. And then the last point on here, which is also very important to keep in mind, is that currently about 85% of video is watched on Facebook without the sound turned on, all right? And that's because a lot of that video is being watched on the phone, and a lot of those people are in public when they're doing it, or they're at work, or they're, you know, in the bathroom, right, all that kind of stuff. And they don't want to have the sound playing, and so you can add automatically, you can add subtitles to your videos. I think if they're under 3 minutes, Facebook will even proofread them for free for you. But you can, it's an auto-generated feature. It uses AR to kind of guess what you're saying, and then you have to go through and proofread it. But you really want to make sure you have subtitles on your videos as much as possible, because they will get much longer view time. So you get about twice as long of an average view time if it does have subtitles.
Sir?
Uh-huh.
Are you going to show us how to add a subtitle? Or is that just you put
we're
it?
going to be talking about editing video
comments?
in the next training, so we'll probably go over that then.
I see. Okay.
It's literally just a button when you put it on your page, so you can click. It'll automatically generate them. So, but that'll probably be a part of next month's topic.
If you want to stick around after the session, we can also show you personally that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. So what we're going to try to do now is I'm going to be showing you first just a couple basic settings within your phone. So if everyone wants to go ahead and take their phone out. And then as you can see here, I'm also going to show you how you can spend about $200 to $300 to get yourself a super nice setup of lighting and sound equipment that's going to definitely improve the quality of your video. Now, you do not have to spend any money to get started, and what I will tell you right now, don't bother spending $200 before you've ever made your first video. So if you've made a couple, if you've already posted a couple videos on Facebook, you might want to go ahead and invest in some of this. But if it's the first time you're ever making a video, just start with this. You don't need anything else, right? So why do you think I say that? If you're a newbie, why only start with the phone instead of buying a bunch of equipment first?
Make sure you're going to do it.
Exactly. Why is that? Why does it make sure you're going to do it?
Don't waste the money if you're not going to do it.
Yeah, there's no excuse, right? So if all you're going to do is just take this out and make a video, there's no, you're not waiting to buy equipment, you're not waiting to get fancy or anything.
So get started.
Yeah, it's all about just getting started, right? So anytime we add complexity, it makes something less likely to happen. So what we found with a lot of our customers is the best thing to do is just to take your phone out and make a couple videos. They're not going to be very nice, okay? The whole point is just to try. And then see what you liked about it, see what you didn't, and then make adjustments from there. So some of the tips I am going to give you is going to be just using the camera and not worrying about actually having any equipment, and then we'll go from there. All right, so go ahead and open your screen up. So first of all, does everybody know how to find the camera app in their phone? I told you, we're starting basic, right? So you want to look for...
That's not such a bad thing.
Well, it's fine, right? So you want to look for the icon on the iPhone. I believe it looks like this. Or this was, I think, the iPhone 7.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
iPhones. Yeah.
But it's going to look like a little camera in some form or a little picture, all right? And once you open that up, you should see a screen that obviously shows, what your camera is viewing, right? Okay? So the two buttons I want you to take a look at first are going to be, so on my phone here, it's a big white circle. That is the picture button. That takes the picture. And then the red button is the video button. All right? So if you want to go ahead and maybe push both, see what happens if you haven't explored those yet. So obviously what we're talking about today is the red button. So I'm going to just go ahead and show you, once I push that, what it looks like. So if you can see my screen here, you'll see that there's a stop button and there's also a pause button. So the pause button is the two little bars. I think everybody knows what the pause and the stop button probably look like. It's the same thing you would see on a remote controller, right? The difference between...
Yeah, we don't have it. That's because our iPhone.
Okay, well...
On iPhones,
You don't
they don't have a pause button.
Okay, so
yeah,
on iPhone
Androids,
you don't have the pause, and there's going to be differences between the brands, obviously, here. So if you do have an Android, and I have an Android, Vanessa has the iPhone, so she knows more about that one, so she can kind of chime in on that. One of the nice things here is you do have a pause button, so if you're recording a video and you want the same video to pause and then add more to it, so let's say you're in an event, you're kind of walking around, maybe you're getting little interview clips, you're just getting some shots of the event, you can hit the pause button, and then when you hit record again, it's going to be part of the same video. Okay, the only difference is if you hit stop, that's going to finish that video clip and save that clip. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily matter because you can always put them together when you do your editing. But if you want them all part of the same clip and you just want to keep it easy, then use the pause button if you're on an Android. All right. Next thing I want to make sure that you're aware of. So go ahead and hit stop if you're currently recording something. is there should be a, it's either going to look like this for the flash, or on the Android it's probably just a little little lightning bolt icon. So is everybody seeing that on their screen there? So that's your flash, all right? Now generally when you're recording video, you want to have your flash turned off, all right? The flash on these phones is just the little bitty light bulb that's in the back of the phone. It's not very powerful, all right? So it's not a particularly good light. Just to give you an example, this is the smallest light I ever used to record a video. So you can see how big this is compared to this tiny little light on your phone, right? Now if you're in total darkness and you have no other lights, then you got to use the flash, okay? So if it is dark out and you have no equipment with you, go ahead and turn the flash on. It's just that generally it's still not a lot of light. These cameras in your phone, they require a lot of light in order to make them small enough to fit into a phone. They're not great at absorbing a ton of light. In fact, that's the thing that's gotten a lot better about those cameras in the past 2 years. So now they're much better at low light, but they're still not nearly as good as like the DSLR camera that Vanessa has. Like that'll soak up a lot more light than this will. So that's the flash button. So there's usually 3 settings. You can have it turned off entirely. You can have it turned to auto, which is really more for taking pictures. And then you can have it just completely turned on. So you'll notice if you have it completely turned on and then you hit the record button, it'll just turn on. And it's going to stay on as I use this, right? And I can't even hardly tell the flash is on with my hand like this far away, right? So it's not a very bright light. So what I'd recommend there is just go ahead and keep it off unless you're in an absolute emergency and you have to get some light. Then you can turn it on, but 95% of the time, some sort of external lighting is going to be better than having your flash on, okay? So there's a couple quick tips there. A couple other things I want to show you, and then we'll move on to some of the equipment. The next one is the selfie camera. So right now you're looking through the camera that points out the back. So you should see a little icon that looks like a camera, and it's either got kind of arrows going around it like this, or there's a little circle with arrows in the middle. Just go ahead and click on that, and you'll notice that now you're looking at yourself. You can see yourself on the camera there. All right, so that's called your selfie camera, and that camera is right up next to the speaker at the top of your phone.
Raise your hand if you're having trouble finding any of this, and I'll come around. Yeah. Did you have trouble? I thought you got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is your selfie camera. So where this is useful is obviously if you want to record a video of yourself. And the reason, so obviously this is the kind of thing you would use for like video chat, right? But it's also very good if you want to record, like a walk and talk video. So anybody ever seen one of these kind of videos where it's like walking around the street or something? Probably one of the easiest videos you can make. And that's what you're going to use to do that, is that selfie camera. Now there's a couple things you have to remember if you're using the selfie camera, all right? Number one is you need to remember to look at the camera while you're recording yourself. It is very tempting to look at yourself while you're recording yourself, right? But why do you think you have to look at the camera and not the picture of yourself? Yeah, right, because that's what's looking at the eyes, right? So you can tell if someone's looking at themselves on the camera, they're not making eye contact, and it looks kind of uncomfortable. Because it's like they're looking at your nose or your lips while they're talking to you. So it's like they're not quite looking in your eyes, but they're also still looking at you, so it's a little weird. Just make sure that...
Where's the camera again?
So it's right, you'll see a little circle right next to the speaker at the top of your phone.
Yeah.
So that's what you want to look at. And you'll catch yourself kind of going back and forth, because you might want to make sure you don't, that you're in the frame, but just make sure you try to look at that as much of that time as possible. And then obviously on the back, the camera is a lot more obvious. There's really nothing else to look at. So when you're filming with the other side, make sure people are looking at that camera. But that's probably the number one thing I see people kind of mess up when they're doing this, right? So that's the selfie camera. And then the last thing, so go ahead and switch that back to the other camera. So if you hit the button again, it'll switch back to the front-facing camera. And then if you hold it up and just kind of pick something in the room, and I want you to tap the screen with your finger and hold it in place for a couple seconds. And something should pop up that says like AF or AE lock. Okay? What that means is that it's locked the focus on the thing you held your finger down on.
On iPhones, it doesn't always say AF or AE lock. It might just, you'll see how it just focuses in. It makes it a little brighter. Yeah.
Now what that is doing is it's locking all of your settings on the thing you clicked on, right? Now the reason that that can be important when you're filming, and this is a slightly more advanced technique, so you don't have to always do this, but the reason to do that is that these phones will autofocus as you're filming. Alright, so what that means is that depending on what's right in front of the lens, it will adjust its focus, and in particular, it's going to adjust the brightness that it's taking in, right? So remember I said these aren't great at absorbing a lot of light, so there's an algorithm, there's some software that's always adjusting for that, right? What'll happen is, I'll give you an example, is if I'm standing here and my camera's, let's say 5 feet out in front of me, and I'm moving my hands. A lot of people talk with their hands. A lot of the videos we do, it's, that's kind of the setup, is there's a talking head, you're kind of standing in front of a camera talking. If you're moving your hands a lot, the amount of light that's bouncing off of your skin and your hands is changing the amount of light the camera's picking up. And so what happens is it keeps adjusting up and down. So the screen goes from bright to dark to bright to dark, and it gets really annoying, right? So if you're watching these videos, it's like it's almost like a strobe light is happening, especially if the person is really animated, okay? So if you lock focus on that person's face first, then you shouldn't get that kind of up and down sort of effect with the lighting, all right? Now there are a ton of other adjustments you can make in here. We are not going to go into all those today because we could talk about it for hours and it will just get confusing. But once you've made a couple videos, you can use those features to do a lot of really cool things. And I will say that this is my old phone. I have my new phone actually set up on the tripod back there to record this. On the new phone, I can even do things like super slow motion. So I think it's like 1/8 the normal speed. So things like you see somebody jumping and they're hardly moving. You can do really cool stuff like that. You can do time-lapse videos, so you can leave your camera somewhere. So especially when you're doing like a cleanup or tear down, or you're if somebody like staging, for instance, you can set your phone up and record that in time lapse, and that makes a really cool maybe 30-second video for like a 1 hour long process, right? So just think about the features in the phone, and then in addition to that, there's apps. I'm not getting into the apps today, but there's all kinds of cool apps, especially for Instagram, that do really small, kind of simple things, but they do them really well. So just one I'll just tell you about for 2 seconds is called Boomerang, and all it does is it takes a 1-second clip and then it plays it back and forth over and over again. So you may have seen that on social media. A lot of times people they'll do like a cheers, they'll have like a drink and they'll cheers it and it'll just keep coming back and forth like that. So there's all kinds of creative things you can try with those kinds of apps as well. So that's the basics of the phone. So let's talk next about kind of how to hold the phone to make sure that you're getting the best possible steady video. So when you're doing a selfie video, we already kind of went over that. And so in that case, a lot of times you're going to do vertical. And the idea here is to hold the phone out, and a lot of times it's about as far away as you can get it from yourself. All right? Now, these type of videos, what you actually want to think about a lot of times when you hold the phone this way is, number one, you want to keep your arm as steady as possible. All right? So if you have trouble holding something like this, then you might want to get a selfie stick. That's another way to make a selfie video. Or you might just not want to do this kind of video. You might want to have somebody help you, right? So if you're having trouble stabilizing, I do have a tool that it costs about 125 bucks. We'll talk about this in a little bit. That does help you automatically stabilize, so you might want to invest in that as well. But for now, we're talking about just using the phone. So when you're using this, so you want to make sure you're holding it out nice and far. And the number one thing I would say you want to consider when you're doing a selfie video is what's behind you. All right? For a couple reasons. One, make sure it's not embarrassing. So there are all kinds of people that have done videos and there's a mirror behind them and they're not wearing pants, or like all kinds of crazy stuff. So just be careful about what's behind you, or if your kids are running around and they're understanding your environment. And then you can also think about it from a beneficial standpoint, right? So thinking about in terms of like, is my background in this video interesting? Is it something that's going to catch someone's eye? So we're going to talk later about when are the times to take your phone out. That's one thing to think about. So I'll give you an example for something I did. So this past kind of winter break, so to speak, I was down in Florida for a week, and I was on the beach, and nice day. It wasn't like super hot, but it was nice enough to go walk on the beach a little bit. And so I was like, well, this is a pretty cool setting. Most people are at home and it's like 30 degrees and they're probably miserable and they're gonna be really mad when they see them on the beach. So it's gonna catch their attention, right? Like it's gonna stand out. So I walked down the beach and I recorded like a 30-second video, and I just talked about, how to make that kind of video. Obviously, I do marketing, but you could talk about anything. You could walk down the beach and talk about real estate. It doesn't matter, right? But the idea was it's just a cool setting. So you could hear the ocean, you could see the ocean behind me. I made sure to kind of go back and forth so you would see the beach a little and the ocean. So a lot of times when you're doing selfie videos, it's really more about what's behind you and less about exactly what you're doing or saying on camera. And it's a cool way to make videos that are very interesting without being too kind of pompous, right? So what I ended up doing is I did that video, and then I was in Colorado the next week, and I was snowboarding, and I'm not very good at snowboarding, so this is probably very dangerous, but I found a spot that was like very flat, and I was not moving very quickly, and I actually got my phone out there, and I did the same sort of thing. I was like, hey, now I'm snowboarding, and then what I did when I got home is I combined the two videos. So I had me walking on the beach, and then they cut to me snowboarding down a mountain, and it's like a 30-second clip. So obviously those were just two very unique settings that most people that I was showing the video to hadn't seen before, right? If I lived in Colorado, it maybe wouldn't be as cool to do a snowboarding video. Yeah.
Did you need an app to combine those videos that much later?
Yeah, there are a lot of the phones have basic video editing built into them, so you could do it through the phone.
I see.
It's in a pinch, I've edited videos on the phone. It's not the worst, but you can do so much more with a piece of software on a computer. So most of the time I will upload my videos to my computer and I'll edit them there.
And are those free, or is that something you have to pay for?
You can get free versions, although I will say most of the editing software we use is something we would pay, so we'd recommend paying for.
I see. Okay.
A lot of them you can get a free trial where you can do a couple small videos, or they'll put like a watermark on the video, but they'll still let you use the full software. So you want to make sure you find one you like. So I'd recommend trying.
Which paid for.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you talk about like the finished product of the edited video, it makes sense to pay a little money for some decent software, or to pay someone else to do it. So a lot of our clients will do that, where they'll record all their own stuff, but then they'll pass it on to somebody else. Like that's something we help them with, is getting them edited, adding their name, adding a little music, just making them look a little more polished.
I see.
Right?
So in the next class, we'll show you and actually do a tutorial on a few softwares. iMovie, which is free for people who have Apple computers, iPhones. Movie Maker, one for Android, and then a paid version called Wondershare Filmora, and that's the one we use. It's very user friendly. You don't need to understand a lot of tech to be able to use it, and it's only $80 one time to buy it, and then you have access to it for as many videos you want to make. Yep.
Great, thank you.
So so that's obviously the selfie video. So another thing with the selfie, last point I'll make here. You've probably noticed that most people, even when they take selfie pictures, they hold their camera up as opposed to like down here. So any ideas as to why you hold your camera up in the air?
Double chin.
So a big part of it is the double chin. You don't have a double chin. There's one other big reason. Any guesses? So double chin was one of the answers. You don't have the double chin, right?
Better light.
Yeah, that's the other part, is it's better light, right? So 90% of the time when you think about lighting, right, it's coming from above us, right? So if you look at most people, especially on camera, it's always worse on camera. If you look at somebody who's directly under one of these lights, you get really bad kind of shadows on your face from your eyebrows, so you get kind of what you call like raccoon eyes. And so even when you're outside, obviously the sun, unless it's sunset or rise, it's going to be up in the air. So a lot of times the video is going to be shot with a little bit of a downward angle, and that's going to greatly improve the way the light looks on your face, right? Now if you're using a light, so if you have, and I'll show you this in a few minutes, but if you're using one of these and it's on top, that's not as important, because then you have your own light source, okay? So, but again, right now we're talking about just using the phones. That's why a lot of times you're going to see people holding it up a little bit, and they're going to get much better light on their face. And all you want to try to do is make sure that the main source of light, so if it's the sun or if it's overhead lighting, is behind where the camera is, right? So if I have this light right here, I want to kind of film myself this way, right? So that way the light is as close as possible to shining directly into your face, right? Obviously, if the sun's out, that can make you kind of squint a little bit if you're outside, so you gotta adjust for it. But definitely make sure you're holding it up a little bit. The other way to hold the camera, obviously, if you're using the back of the phone, if you're using the main camera, I really recommend trying to hold it with two hands. And in this case, you probably don't want to hold it out like this. Like I usually kind of hold it in close to my body. I'll even kind of lean back a little bit. And again, you're trying to bounce as little as possible. Okay. Now, a lot of modern smartphones have image stabilization built into them. So as much as you are shaking, it's actually adjusting for that with some software, and it's making it more stable. But it can only do so much, right? So if you're really bouncing around, it's not going to fix all of that. So the whole point when you're doing it this way is you just want to be able to keep it as steady as possible, and just make sure that you're able to move around, right? So if you're doing, for instance, a home tour, if you're kind of filming the different rooms in the house, just make sure you're being as stable as possible. And this also, if you hold it this way, allows you to kind of tilt and pan, right? So you can go back and forth like this smoothly. So the challenge there is a lot of people do this stuff and they'll end up being kind of all jerky. So just remember, video is all about smooth motion. So any of the stuff you're doing, you want to make sure that you're rotating very smoothly, probably a little slower than you think you need to until you get used to it. And again, you need the same thing when you go up and down. Now this is just using your hands, and there's a bunch of other tools you can use to get better at this stuff. But again, the idea here is what's the easiest thing you can do? How can you just get started? And obviously if you're holding it this way, you can also then tap on the screen while you're doing this if you just hold with one hand, and that allows you to do those change the focus and those kinds of things. Alright, so now let's start talking about how, once you've shot a couple easy videos, how can you start getting a little bit fancier? So one of the first things, probably the first thing I would recommend someone buying is a tripod of some sort. So I want to show you a couple of different examples of the kinds of tripods you can get. So probably the most basic would be this one here. This is not much of a tripod. It extends a little bit, so that's as long as the legs get, right? This is a Amazon Basic, so this is one of those products that Amazon makes themselves. And I believe it's called a tabletop tripod. Right, so you can see once I set it up, that's it. Pretty small, it's not the most durable. I think it cost me about $10, so it's pretty cheap. And then what you're going to need on top of this is a, let's see if I can find it. Here we go. I'm not going to take it off of here. But you want to get one of these, which is a smartphone adapter for a tripod. Right, so if you just search for tripod smartphone adapter, you can get one of these tiny little clamps. And what this does, so it's really only that top part. This is a piece of my tripod, but it's just this little piece that clamps, and you get nicer ones. This is about the most basic you can get. This is probably about $5 to $8 on Amazon. So if you can combine these two, let's go ahead and unscrew it real quick to show you. So it's going to have a little screw. Most things in video tech and accessories have a 1/4 inch screw. So that's kind of the standard mount. Everything's kind of this 1/4 inch, so they all tend to fit together really easily. So in this case, you have this little piece of rubber on top of there. It's kind of a grommet to grab whatever you screw onto it, and you just literally screw this right onto there. And so now you have a little bit of a tripod, and you've got the legs. Make sure it's tight, and then what you do is you just take your phone and you just pop it in there, right? So what this allows you to do now is set up on a desk or a table, kind of wherever you need to put the phone. And it's going to be nice and stable for you, right? So a lot of people will choose to shoot a lot of their videos sitting down at a chair so they can use something like this. So you're spending less than probably $20 for something like this. Stable video, depending on the person, some people are really, really stable with their hands, but a lot of us aren't. The stability of your video does go a long way. So that bounciness, it was cool in Saving Private Ryan when they first started doing it. A lot of us are way more bouncy than the people that film professional video. We just don't realize it. So we can be really shaky with our hands, right? So this is a really good investment. I would definitely recommend this for somebody that's already done a couple videos, starting to get the hang of it. So that's real basic right there. The other thing you can do with this little adapter is that you can then put this on a more traditional type of tripod. So a lot of people have these because they already have them for their recording equipment or their cameras at home. And a lot of them will work just fine. So again, you got the little 1/4 inch screw on here. And we're just going to go ahead and pop this back on. There's a little tab on the bottom to finish screwing it in. All tripods are a little different, so yours might not necessarily work like this. And then you can just simply pop it back into the tripod. So now we have this attachment, and we can put the phone on the tripod itself. And I actually kind of put it on backwards, so we can swap it around. Doesn't really matter. So now you got your phone set up on your tripod, and then obviously this allows you to, most cases. We're going to bring that up to about eye level. So now you can do standing video. You can shoot different scenes in the house, so you can stand in a room and walk towards or away from the camera. You get a lot more creative. So that would be another thing, is possibly investing in a tripod like this. This is a Sunpack Ultra 6000 PG. I don't know what that means, but it just means it's a cheap tripod. This is about a $60 tripod. You can get tripods as cheap as probably 30 bucks. They're going to be pretty flimsy, so the only thing you're going to want to put on them would be a phone. If you buy something that's, even this one's a little flimsy for the DSLR, you probably want something a little heavier duty with a heavier camera. But this is a good entry-level tripod. We actually have 2 of them. The other one's in the back there with my phone on it. They work pretty darn well for what we're doing. So I would say anything under 100 bucks is probably a decent bet when you're first getting started with this stuff. All right, so that's the option for the tripod. So I want to make sure we talked about those. Now, another version of the tabletop tripod, and this is when you get a little bit fancier. This isn't too crazy, but this one is kind of a step up from your Amazon basics. So this product is it's a Ulanzi, U-L-A-N-Z-I. If you're trying to keep track of the stuff, it's tabletop tripod. And it's the same idea, right? The reason I like this one is that it doubles as a handle for holding the phone as well, okay? So this is not a stabilizer. It's not going to make sure the phone is stable like this one will, and I'll show you that again in a second. But it does give you a much better grip. We tend to be a lot more stable when we're holding something like this than when we're holding it with just 2 fingers, right? Because this is kind of an awkward way to hold something. This is obviously a much more firm kind of way to grasp. So the nice thing about this is that it's got the tripod leg, so you can also set it on a table as needed, right? So it's pretty handy. And then when you want to actually pick it up and hold it, you can do this. So that's the bottom that I have on this. I've got a couple additional accessories here. This is another type of clamp for the phone. I prefer this one. It's a little bit heavier duty. And you can see the way this one works. So this was a spring, right? So it just kind of snaps closed on top of your phone. This one actually has a screw that you adjust. All right, and the reason I like that is because it tends to be a little bit, there's a wider variety of stuff that'll fit in here, and you can also make sure it clamps down nice and tight. This will only clamp down as strong as the spring is. This you can just keep screwing down. So what you do with this, and there's an extra accessory I'll mention in just a second, is you just simply kind of slide the phone in, and then you screw the clamp down. Now the other reason I like this one is it has more threads. So we talked about how everything is a 1/4 inch thread. This one has the thread on the bottom. That's where we screwed it onto the tripod. But it also has a thread on top. And so what that does is it allows you to mount other things on here. So this is the one that I'll use for when I'm actually doing like walk and talk videos or vlogging, things like that, because I can attach a couple more things to this. So now we're getting into some nicer accessories. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you here, and I'll pass some of this around so you can kind of play around with it too. Did we have these in here? Yeah, sorry, I skipped ahead a little bit, but I just wanted to show you that it's called an Aputure LED mini light. So these are $45 on Amazon. This is, that's probably about the cheapest. You can get lights that are a little bit less expensive, but this one's really compact. It comes with a USB charger, and it comes with a mount to put it on here. And so what you can do with this light, and let me turn it on and show you. So it's not, obviously it's still pretty small, so that's not putting out a ton of light, but you can imagine if you're walking around, you can see how much light that puts on my face. There's obviously enough light in here anyway. But this is really good for when you have a low lighting situation. This will give you a lot of light, especially at night. But it definitely gives you enough just for, if you're going to be this close. So the way this works is it comes with a little adapter. And again, you see the little screw on the bottom there. Everything's a 1/4 inch screw. So we just got to pop this in. And then it just screws right on top. So nice thing is also that we can direct it either way. So if we're doing a selfie video, we can turn the light around and film ourselves. Or if we're doing a just kind of traditional video we're walking through or we're filming somebody else, we can turn it that way, right? So I can obviously turn it that way, or I can flip it around, screw it back down, and now I can shine it on myself. Right, so if I want to do a video, I can do something like that. So again, this is much more stable, and now I can hold it, still just holding it with one hand, but this is going to give me a much more stable video than if I had done it with my fingers like that, okay? So you can put a light on there, that's pretty handy. And then the other accessory that we really recommend is going to be some sort of audio, okay? So I want to show you a couple microphones. And if this is getting overwhelming, we will send out some links to all these different kinds of accessories.
Yeah.
Now, what was the name of the phone holder?
Of this part here.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing a brand name on this one. I might have to send you a link to it later. I'll have to look it up. But this would just be, I would call it like a clamp style cell phone tripod adapter. So that's kind of a long name, but yeah, if you just go on Amazon and search for tripod adapters for your smartphone, there's this version and there's this version. They both tend to come up on there. And they're made by a ton of companies, right? So just look for one that's got decent reviews and it's affordable. You know, the truth is, like, this is just molded plastic. It's not like it's anything fancy. Just make sure you're not buying one that's never been reviewed before, because sometimes they can be a little bit flimsier.
What's the thing on the side?
So I'm just about to get to that. So.
Okay.
So that was the lighting, right? So lighting is really important. Lighting is one of the easiest things to mess up, but it's also one of the easiest things to do properly for just being a little bit conscious of it. So obviously, if you put a light on this device, it's going to make sure you have good lighting. But even if you don't have a light, just remember what we talked about earlier, which is think about where the light is in the room, and just make sure your camera is between you and the light source, and you should be fine, right? So that's lighting. Now the other thing, you know, that it's surprising because I know I mentioned earlier, hey, 85% of videos are watched without the sound, right? So you would think maybe the sound doesn't matter. But the truth is the sound is one of the main things that will lead to someone stopping watching your video. And that 15 or so percent, and the number of people watching videos with sound is actually going up because we're getting more used to having like earbuds in all the time and things like that. So it is going up, the amount of people watching video with sound. But if you turn a video on and it has bad sound, that's it's probably the number one reason someone clicks out of your video, okay? So you want to make sure you do just a couple simple things to get as good a sound as possible, right? So I think I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but we'll get back to the gimbal in a second. Okay, so sound is, a lot of it is going to be based on how close can you get a microphone to your mouth. Right? So it's all about the source of the sound. So wherever the sound is coming from, you want to get a microphone as close to that place as possible. So one of the things that you can use is what's called a lapel or lavalier microphone. So I'm wearing one right here, and I want to show you an example of one as well. So these are pretty simple. A lot of them will plug directly into your smartphone, so you can get a version for about 10 to 15 bucks on Amazon. And again, there's a whole bunch of them. We'll send some links out. We have 2 or 3 different brands, to be honest, so we're kind of experimenting with which one we like the most. But this is something that you're just going to go ahead and plug directly into the smartphone. And if you have a newer iPhone, you're going to need that little dongle, right? So there's a little like 3-inch piece you plug into the iPhone. It allows you to then plug a headphone jack in. So if you have one of the newest iPhones, you're going to need that attachment. But you know, if you're using Android, Androids still have that plug on them. So you just simply plug it in, right? The camera should recognize that it's then picking up external sound. So if you're on an Android, it'll actually say on the screen external microphone plugged in. You want to make sure you see that because that tells you that your microphone is working. And then you can either clip it directly to your shirt and just let it hang, or you can run it through like right now I have this run through my shirt and it's kind of in my pocket. And I actually have an external recorder I'm recording with right now. It's a little bit more advanced. We won't get into that right now. But this is the most basic thing you can do. So for, again, selfie videos, just kind of pop it on, you do one of these, like it's really simple. And your sound will be about 2 times the quality if you do this than if you just try to get the phone to pick up the sound, right? So this is already a great improvement. Now I'm going to show you a little bit more advanced option. And the limitation of a lapel microphone is obviously it has to be clipped on someone's body near their mouth. And we can't always do that, especially if you're doing something with a little bit of action, or if there's multiple people, this can get kind of cumbersome. So the next thing that we have, and this is what this other attachment on here is for, is what we call a shotgun microphone. So this is a really small version. You see the thing on top of Vanessa's camera there? That's kind of a normal size version, right? So that's a traditional shotgun microphone. This is what's called a Rode, R-O-D-E is the brand, Video Micro. So this is designed specifically to work with smartphones or with really small cameras, like a GoPro or something like that. So this is much smaller, so it's not quite as powerful as a bigger microphone like that. But for smartphones, this is awesome. So I really like this thing. So these are about $60 if I remember correctly. So it's a little bit more than your lapel mic. But the nice thing is it doesn't have to be attached to anyone. So the way these work is that they pick up sound whatever direction they're facing. Okay, so this microphone, and you'll actually see I have this on what looks like upside down, if you can see that. That's actually because this is a omnidirectional microphone. This picks up sound in any direction, even underneath it. So sometimes you actually want to turn it upside down. It reduces the popping sounds when you say things like P, right? You have that P at the beginning. That pop can actually be picked up as a really loud noise on a microphone like this. So if you turn it down, it tends to reduce that. But that's omnidirectional. This will pick up my voice. It'll pick up anything in the room, right? The key is it just needs to be close, because the further away you get, the less likely it is to actually pick that sound up. This is a little different. This is going to pick up sound in the direction it's pointing towards, okay? So it'll go further too. So if you're on the other side of the room and you're talking and this is aiming at you, it's actually going to have a pretty good chance of picking you up. It'll still sound distant. It won't sound great, but it's a lot more directional than the microphone I'm wearing. Yeah.
Is it better than regular hearing?
It can be, so a lot of it just depends on the sensitivity, right? So you can control, like when you plug it into your smartphone, it's just going to automatically adjust sensitivity, right? Using an algorithm, but you can plug it into the recording device I have in my pocket. You can adjust the sensitivity on. So yeah, if you turn it up high enough, you can hear a pin drop from across the room. Now, if somebody sneezes and they're closer, it's going to blow up your eardrums, right?
Right.
So you don't really want to record at those levels.
Right.
But yes, just like you've probably seen, commercials for like bird listening, and you have like the dish and you can point it. Like this is all that is. It's one of these, and then there's a dish to kind of funnel the sound even better into it, right? So yeah, you can use these kind of hear quite a distance, but everything closer to you then is super, super loud, right? So what I have here is this microphone actually came with this little attachment, and what this does is it reduces the possibility of picking up sound from bumping wherever it's attached, right? So you can see it'll flex a little bit, so it just kind of reduces vibrations. So what I do is I have this little attachment. This actually came with this Ulanzi tripod, so if you order this one, you can actually get all 3 pieces as one kit, so that might just be the way to go, and you'll get the adapter for the phone as well. It does not include the microphone, so it included this bar, and then this piece and the microphone and the cable I had to buy separately, all right? So then you take the microphone, plug one end in, a little adapter cord for the phone, and you do need an adapter cord. So if you're going to order the Rode Video Micro, just make sure that you get the adapter for a smartphone, and it should say whether or not that's included. Otherwise, this cord is actually intended for a camera. So the type of plug that goes in here is only slightly different, but you do need an adapter. So if you're going to use it with your phone, just make sure you order the one that's specifically for the phone that comes with the adapter. So now this is plugged in, now I can get directional sound, okay? So this is good for instance, if we didn't have that camera Vanessa's carrying, she could set this up and she could go around and record with this, and it'd have a very similar effect, right? So anything within about 10 to 20 feet, she's going to be able to kind of point this at and pick that sound up a lot better, right? And then if you want to get a little more advanced, if you're doing selfie videos, the camera on the front of most phones is nowhere near as good as the camera on the back, right? So a lot of my new phone, I think the front-facing camera is 8 megapixels, which is actually really high, and the back one I think is 12. A lot of phones, even just from a year or two ago, the front-facing camera is only like 2 or 3 megapixels, and the back one is, in a lot of cases, over 10, right? So there are reasons that you might decide, hey, it's just too grainy when I film with this front camera. I don't like how it looks. So you might want to actually flip it around and use the back camera to film yourself. And that's where like this kind of thing can actually come in kind of handy, right? So now I can, you got to practice a little. This is a little higher skill level, but now I can actually do some recording, and I'm going to pick up decent audio. And again, I could wear the lapel mic if I wanted to, right? So if you add it all together, let's kind of put this back on so you can see what it looks like. And if you haven't already seen somebody walking around with something like this, you're going to start to see people walking around doing this kind of crap, right? So you're walking down the streets and be like, talking on their phone, right? It's just going to happen. So we've already done it at least 1 or 2 events where we got it out and rigged it up, and it's a little ridiculous looking, right? But you get used to it. And this essentially pretty closely simulates a professional camera setup, right? So you got some light, you got decent sound. A lot of smartphones, the cameras in these things now are pretty darn impressive. So, if this was 10 years ago, you would have to have a big old handheld shoulder rig with a light on it to get something that's about the same quality, right? Last thing I'll say about this particular setup is that if you are going to live stream, this can be very helpful. So this is a really nice setup to have ready to go whenever you want to live stream. Live streaming is kind of probably something you shouldn't start with. Right? It's probably not the first kind of video I would make just because it's a lot more pressure. But having this equipment ready, honestly, it makes me a lot more comfortable because I know I'm automatically going to sound good and I'm automatically going to have good light. So if I'm going to go live, I know that that basic stuff is at least covered, right? So now I just have to worry about what I'm saying. As opposed to if I'm just using the phone and I'm looking, oh, where's the light? And I got to hold it a certain, that stuff can get distracting, especially when you're live. So we've probably used this to live stream more than any other kind of situation. All right, a lot of stuff. Any questions on some of this tech? I'm going to go ahead and just start passing some of this around. So if you want to play a little bit with it, just kind of see how it works.
And remember, we will send a list of all this equipment with brand names, and it'll be a digital list so that you can also click directly to Amazon and purchase it if you want to.
Do you have the email address of all the attendees then?
We don't, but Jennifer, you do, right?
Yes.
So we'll send it to Jennifer with Busey, and she'll send it out to you guys.
Okay, great.
Yes.
We haven't yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
One other quick tripod I want to show you that's just kind of cool. This is called a Joby, J-O-B-Y, and it's a bunch of these little interlocking joints. And so it's almost like a tentacle that you can shape, and then it actually has little magnets in the end. So the reason this is kind of useful is that you can actually, let's say you're out and about and you find like a post or something, you can just wrap this around. You can actually kind of set this up and you can make anything into kind of a tripod for you. So just something that every now and then we'll pull out, but it's kind of a neat little device as well. So those are all the different tripods. You take a look at the microphone. Other handhelds. So this is getting a little fancy. Alright, so this is what's called a gimbal. Alright, so this is, the more common term is a stabilizer. And so I'll show you how this works really quick. So we talked a second ago about how unsteady our hands are when we're holding this stuff. And so a few companies started making these devices that allow us to kind of offset how much your hand shakes when you're holding it. So you gotta get it. Oh, that's fine. So we gotta get it balanced first. Alright, so this particular gimbal is actually a brand new product. It's called the Osmo. And it's actually the Osmo 2. So the first one that they came out with was about $250. This one is the newer version. It's half that price, only $125. So it is a chunk of money. It's got to be something that you're going to be using. But what you can do with this is it smooths out all of your motion. Right? So there's a couple different settings. So you can see right now what it's doing is it's following the direction I'm pointing it, but it's smoothing out my motion. Right? So it'll kind of, if I move too quickly, it'll take a little second to catch up. And then if I switch the function, now you can see it's like staying focused on the same spot, right? So as I go up, it's going to adjust and keep, even if I keep going back, it keeps it flat. So that's the kind of thing where I can point at something and I can move all over the place and it's going to keep the camera straight. So there's a lot of, this is a little more of a cinematography toy than anything else, right? But you're probably going to start to see a lot more people using these. And it just allows you to film much more movie kind of looking type of video, right? So you can do a lot more of the cool kind of sweeping shots and kind of come in really close to stuff. So these are, I'm not going to talk a ton about how to use it because to be honest, most of you probably shouldn't buy this quite yet. get used to making video first, and then maybe you can justify investing in a gimbal. But I just think it's kind of cool. So there's also a stick on here that you can adjust where it's pointing. So one thing you can do with this is really cool is you can mount this on a tripod, and then it'll do time-lapse videos where it'll also move, right? So have you ever seen like sunset, like you go out to the arch, set up your camera, and get like a shot of the sunset where the camera kind of pans very slowly, right? So that's kind of a really cool feature. So if you're getting into higher end stuff, this is a nice little toy to have available.
Mount on top of the
light
phone like
and
this.
the microphone on there as well.
So this is a little harder to do that with, right? So if you do need light, a lot of times you're gonna need to hold it separately, or you're gonna have to have some sort of other situation. And then a lot of times if I'm using something like this, I'm gonna use a pocket recorder. So you can, right now, this microphone is plugged into a recording device which is in my pocket, and then I'm gonna put this audio and combine it with that video later, right? So. It's and that's why we're starting basic, right? You don't need to be worrying about a lot of this stuff. I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an intro to it. So yeah, I mean that's why I say keep it simple for now, and then you can kind of get more complicated as you get used to some of the stuff.
Nick, with that one you can have the lavalier, the lapel mic plugged in though, and have that run to you, right?
It kind of gets in the way.
Oh, it gets in the way.
I would try and put that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've already kind of talked about all this. Obviously, if you just want to have a couple checkpoints for making good video, proper lighting and background is the first thing you want to think about. So one thing I will mention, and one of the last things I'm going to do is show you my kind of studio type setup. And you want to make sure you have a clean backdrop, right? So you're actually going to probably want to invest in some backdrop paper. You get rolls of this stuff and you just tack to the wall. It's actually not smooth. It's kind of usually got a texture to it, but it makes a nice kind of even background for you. If you use a wall, which is okay, sometimes those walls have weird kind of deficiencies in them. You don't even see until you put it on camera. So just remember the backdrop's important. This picture here is an example of us using a natural background. So this is a listing. One of our clients had a listing down right next to the City Museum. So if you see right here, it's all the stuff on the top of the City Museum. So we went up on the top. This was obviously before the winter when it was still a little warm out. And we got a nice video, and this is again, we just shot it with a cell phone, of him, and then it's got the City Museum in the background, and it was obviously kind of an interesting situation.
I'm sorry.
Number 2 is clear sound. We talked about that already. Make sure you got a microphone, something that's going to help the sound. And then the third is just making sure that you have good content, right? So we're not getting a ton into the actual content today, but just to give you kind of a general idea there. Okay, so now I want to show you, where's the slide for the setup? Okay, this is kind of the last lighting thing I want to show. So there's a couple sets of lights you can get if you're going to be doing more of a studio type of setup. Again, start with just your phone, start with doing some basic video, but if you get to the point where you go, I actually have an idea for a couple educational videos I want to do, right? Like I've seen a couple actually loan officers that'll do like a weekly show, and they'll do like, hey, here's a market update. And they're usually sitting at a desk, or they're sitting in front of some sort of backdrop that they made. Or it could just be tips. A lot of people will do tip videos. They'll say, hey, here's the 3 things you need to think about before you sell your home, that sort of stuff, right? If you're doing that, you probably want somewhat of a controlled environment. And I just want to show you how to set up the lights and the kinds of lights you can buy to do that. So over here we have our original lighting setup, and this is probably the cheapest way to go. The one thing I don't like about this set of lights is that there's no battery, right? So they have to be plugged in. So if you're trying to take them somewhere, they're kind of a pain in the butt to move around. But they're really cheap. This set of lights cost, I think, $60, something like that. So it was very, very affordable. So it doesn't take much to get started. Now, in our case, we actually switched out the light bulbs that came with it. So this is it's eMart, and again, it's something that Vanessa, I think, documented. We'll actually send you a link for it. But you can get this set of lights. It's going to come with all 3 stands. The umbrellas, it comes with a second set of umbrellas that we don't really use, but they're black and they have a shiny inside, so they're good for like photography. And then it came with light bulbs. That's the only thing that we replaced. So if you wanted to get this particular setup, you'd want to also invest in some Cree LED light bulbs. And these are actually dimmable, I believe 100 watt Cree light bulbs. All right?
Photography store.
Yeah, you can get this, all this stuff you could get at so you probably pay more for it, right? But this is like made in China, kind of super, super cheap version.
Talk about the Cree.
The Cree light bulbs you can get at any hardware store. So they're not actually photography light bulbs. The reason that we got these is that we wanted to be able to add a dimmer switch. And so that allows us to control how bright they are, right? So that's a little fancier than you necessarily need. But especially depending on someone's skin tone, since we work with a wide variety of clients, it can be nice to be able to adjust and decrease the light a little bit. So the setup you want to have, and I apologize if you can't see me back there, but the setup you want to try to have when you have these set up in your studio is you want to have, you can see a diagram of it on the screen up there, is you want to have 2 lights, one on either side of wherever your camera is. So here's my tripod, that's going to be right in the middle. All right, and generally the lights are going to be a little bit above eye level. So you want to go about 6 inches or so above eye level, so they're shining down just a little bit. And you want them to be set up so that they're just a little bit in front of where the camera is. The camera is usually about 6 inches behind the line where those are. And the idea, what you're aiming for, is you just want to have the person's face lit without a lot of shadow on it. Okay, so you don't want to have, you know, and actually a lot of people, they'll do what they call a key and a fill light. So they'll put one light a little closer, and they'll put one light a little bit further away. And that gives people, it will create an accent side, so you'll have one side of the face that's a little brighter than the other. I wouldn't mess with that at first, I just have them both the same distance. And then you'll see there's a third light. So you might be wondering, what do you need this for? Well, it's just sitting behind me. What that's going to do is it's going to eliminate the shadow behind me. Alright, so what it does is it creates a little bit of kind of like, I don't know if you call it almost like a halo effect behind the person. But this means that these 2 lights will then not create a shadow on the wall, and it kind of lights up behind the person. So it gives them a little bit of a glow, right? So the reason I like this setup is that most people don't do it, and so it looks different. So when somebody sees one of these videos that we make, they're not the fanciest videos. It's just generally somebody standing in front of a backdrop talking, but they look a lot nicer than your traditional video of someone talking, right? Because they're just lit properly. So that's one set you can do. Like I said, you're spending about 60 bucks up front. You can use the original light bulbs. These that I put in are about probably 60% brighter than the original set, but the original set would work fine. So I think the Cree bulbs cost me another $60 or $70. So you're probably looking at about 120 bucks to 150 bucks if you want to do our version of the setup, right? Now the other option you have, if you don't want to be tied to a wall, which for us, you know, we kind of quickly got to a point where we were doing a lot of shoots on site, so we wanted something with batteries. So these are battery-powered lights, right? So they're much more portable. Obviously, the downside is you have to charge the batteries, and your light can randomly die if your batteries aren't charged, right? They're pretty much just as bright. These are all LED-based, right? And they also have adjustment on the back. So if you look at the back of these, you can see there's a knob on there, so you can dim them as well. These are all dimmable, at least the ones that we bought. I believe the $40 range. So you know, you're gonna, for a set of this stuff, it's gonna cost more than the stuff you plug into the wall, but it's gonna give you some more options. These lights are also gonna come with this filter on the front, and that's just gonna allow you to decrease or increase how harsh the light is. If you put the filter on, it tends to be a little bit of a smoother light on the subject. If you take it off, it's a little bit more intense, obviously. And then this is just another version. So there's 3 different types of lights, and then I have the little aperture one. Obviously, this one's not nearly as bright. Same deal with this one. Go ahead and turn it on. You can increase or decrease the brightness, and they use the same kind of battery. So we'll send you links for these if you want them. Now, this kind of setup, you're probably looking at spending, you know, about 150 between the 2 lights and the stands here. So again, if you did the Cree bulbs, we're in kind of the same ballpark price-wise. If you just do the basic set of those, you're about half the price, right? So any questions? I know I just kind of flew through a bunch of the setup stuff here. Any other questions on that? Good, okay. And I will go ahead and pass. I'll just take these lights off and you kind of play around with them a little bit.
Excuse me, on one of your photos, you had it looked like an iPhone that had like a little halo light on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that y'all have, or
we don't have
just a random
that
photo that you just?
Yeah, that was just a stock photo, but you can get. I mean,
Was
the
it called
amount.
ring lights? Ring lights?
Ring?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, just like it sounds. And Nick, yeah, you can go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, you can find any kind of light you can imagine, to be honest. I mean, they'll make, yeah, I mean, that particular one, it would probably be called like a selfie light or something like that when you look on Amazon, because it's intended for doing selfies, both pictures and videos. And then obviously all this stuff is collapsible, so when you're done, you just go ahead and collapse it down and take it with you. Generally, I mean, all this portable lighting probably takes me, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes at most to set up. So it really doesn't take that long. A lot of times you can set up what you need in less than 5 minutes. And the difference a little bit of light and decent sound makes is totally worth it, in my opinion, right? So a lot of this stuff, you know, again, don't start here. Don't go out and buy $300 worth of stuff, you know, until you know that you're going to be doing okay on camera. But obviously it's very compact. It's relatively durable. This stuff's all pretty cheap. You know, I think like I said, I think these two stands might have only cost us like $25 total. So you get a lot of stuff pretty affordably, and it does go quite a long way. All right, so let me just finish up here. There's a couple more things to go through. All right, so I think we did all that. Did you put the slide in with the group?
It's the last one, or one before that, I guess. Oh. It might be on it.
Okay. Well, I think we got through all of this, so we only have a couple minutes left. Any other questions about anything we covered today? I know today was pretty intensive.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you're only coming back once a month from here on out?
Yeah, so moving forward, we will be here once a month. So up until now, we were trying to kind of play catch up so that we could get to the point where we could finish in December that way and still do 12 classes. So.
Sitting where you enter place was a calendar for the whole year, as well as details on next month's class if you haven't already signed up. You can just shoot an email to your lender or go online and register.
So last thing I just want to mention as we kind of wrap things up for the day, we this morning at our own event announced that we have created a group on Facebook that's specifically for helping real estate agents learn how to do video marketing. So since we were talking about that today, I thought I'd invite everybody here to go ahead and join that. So if you want to actually just get your phone out and go to Facebook and just search for Real Estate Agents Learn Video Marketing, and that's the group. So you want to make sure you go to the group and just request to join. And so what that group's going to consist of is obviously we're going to be posting a lot of tips in there about how to make video. We're going to be doing some educational videos ourselves, so our goal is to post at least one a week. And then one of the big things we're going to be doing is also allowing agents to give each other feedback. So we're actually going to have a day where you're able to post a video you made and then ask people to give you feedback, which I think will be really helpful, especially as you're getting started, because that way you can get some feedback from a couple people before you post it to all your friends. Although most people are very nice, so usually they don't say mean things to you or anything like that.
To your face.
To your face, that's true. They say them behind your back.
That's true.
Thank you.
Okay, yep, so if you go ahead and join that, we'll go ahead and get you approved. Obviously you don't have to join it, but it's, I think, a good opportunity to have some interaction with other agents that are trying to learn things. And then I think that's it. So we'll be here for an extra 10 minutes or so. We have all the lighting equipment up front here if you want to come play around with it. We didn't really get, obviously, enough time to start shooting any video today, but we can hang around for a few minutes. So if you do want to shoot a little 30-second promotional video or just try something, I mean, go ahead and come up and try the lighting out. We'll definitely hang around for a little bit and help you out. All right. Are you searching for the under groups?
Yeah.
You have to go to the group section. You're gonna help out with this.
You asked questions for people to join?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
You can just,
And then you just
Yeah.
send to message. Okay. Did I set up the lights? Anyone want to shoot a quick video with some of our lights here?
No.
Yeah? Okay, we have one taker.
No one opens it up. Oh, you told I like it on their email?
And then someone else had a question about actions.
Decorating. Yeah.
I think you may have left.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, if he's coming back, I can show he's, if anyone wants to stick around and just see how to add subtitles to videos quickly, we are gonna cover that in the next class, but I'm gonna show that gentleman then.
Oh, yeah. This is
Not fun. Yeah, unfortunately. I know. I didn't even realize until we went through that I forgot that that's a function of Android, but it cannot do that on Apple. Yeah. And you know, what I've seen so far, I have always have an iPhone, he always has an Android. The cameras on the Android actually tend to be better. So I do not have the latest iPhone, the 10. I have heard that that's good, but the one on his, what's your, the Galaxy S9 Plus is amazing. And so whenever I get a new iPhone and hit a new Android, we've always seen it better. So that, I might be eventually switching to Android as a result. Yeah. They're just not keeping up with the technology as much. I'm getting a little lazy, I think. Yeah.
You can take all of them. No, I mean, I know what to do.
Someone else having trouble finding the first?
I am.
You are?
Just start with all of this. Just start.
You do still have lots of food left if you're still hungry or just want a cookie for the road. I got lots of cookies. My daughter. It's hard. Oh, thank you. We're excited. Yeah. We're going to visit my husband's family. He's got an aunt and a cousin in London. So.
Now where are you
She's having her son's Kristen, his cousin's son.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long flight. The only thing I remember is because you're up your way and you're going to go way back. So, we came back from today. Everywhere you go,
You were searching in the right place,
Yeah. I mean, that's the best thing, you know.
So are you an agent? Yes.
No, I'm not.
It's really, really good. It's not that way.
Yeah, so you can if
It's a little bit different than like other kids that are trying to love the video. So if you want to just show you really quick, I'm going to do that.
I've seen anyway.
I'm going to watch it. So you want to watch it? And you know what might be easier? I'm going to try to find your picture. I have some videos that I can show you.
Sure.
Yes, this is the last one. That was pretty good.
You can actually get the Facebook.
I didn't understand really the picture, but
We should have got one together at ICD. We started to the Easter Mass. Everybody's like, oh, look, we're in church together too.
he did that. So he does he's real. Really? Okay.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah. No, good information.
And then once it's in your signature,
You can pull a chair over from there. Yeah, it's not gonna take too long, but
Because they are, I mean, they all.
It's gotta take
take a
time.
seat.
Been sitting out there.
Okay, so let's go over to Facebook. And so what I'm gonna, we have actually a fake page, so we can test things. Then we don't put them up with so we're gonna go to Joe's Bake Shop. Oh, I can get on it.
It's a family trip, just spam email. Is this a work email?
We just love it. It works.
Yeah.
Just run around taking pictures of yourself all the time.
Facebook.
I know.
It's definitely
My daughter is always like, do you feel a little more secure, Bill?
Yes. They don't always want you to go over it. They just have a long video.
I had his Photoshop right there. Next thing you're showing up on there, a swimsuit or something or worse.
A lot of times they'll be like, make sure you delete it completely so there's no deletes.
So here, like this one.
Hey Nick, can you just turn on your hotspot and figure this way to the call? Oh, it's up back here. I just remembered.
But anyways, I think it's